Breaking news. This just in. Iraq has invaded Iran. Today, Iraq attacked Iran's air bases at Mehrabad, Doshan-Tepen, as well as Tabriz, Bakhtaran, Avaz, Dezvol, Urmia, Hamadan, Senadaj, and Abadan. While this was happening, 6 Iraqi army divisions entered Iran on 3 fronts in a successful surprise attack, where they have pushed 8 kilometers inland and occupied 1,000 square kilometers of Iranian territory. We will keep you updated as we receive more information. But for now, let's take a look at the events that preceded this invasion. There is, of course, the Iranian Revolution that has been bubbling since 1976, finally coming to a close just last year, with the toppling of the monarchy and the establishment of the Islamic Republic. As we know, Saddam Hussein, the leader of Iraq, opposed the revolution, as did the United States. Hussein, for his part, worried that the new revolutionary leadership would offset the precarious Sunni-Shia religious balance that exists in Iran. The United States lost their control in Iran after the revolution and the new leadership that took over, and thus lost access to Iran's rich oil supply. It would not be surprising if the United States were found to be backing Iran in this invasion. Backing Iraq in this invasion. We are aware of Hussein's increasing desire to have control over the Shatt al-Arab River and its access to oil. Over the years, the debate over which country, Iraq or Iran, has claims to this area has only gotten more heated. If I had to take a guess, I would say that this border dispute may be a cause of invasion. There is also the ambitions of the separate rulers. Ayatollah Khomeini of Iran he wants to spread Islamic fundamentalism through the Middle East. Saddam Hussein of Iraq wants to make Iraq a regional superpower. There is also, of course, Iran's weaknesses. Officer purges and spare part shortages from American supplies have weakened their military in the recent months. Iran also has limited defenses in the Shatt al-Arab area. Perhaps Iraq saw this as a clean pathway to invasion. Is that right, Susan? What I seem to be hearing is that we have received the latest footage from the invasion. We will now play that footage for you. Warning, the footage may contain graphic material.
ما هم اون تیمی بودیم که اونور بودیم پایین جاده بودیم که عراقی‌ها تو جاده می‌خواستن بیان تو. آقای شاخ شگونی یا نه؟
چیزی نگذشته بود که نخست هواپیماهای خودی و سپس هواپیماهای دشمن سر رسیدند و خوشه‌های آتشین بمب‌های آنان بر سر منطقه سرازیر شد. برادر عراقی که هیچ وقت خودش را گم نمی‌کرد برخاست و گفت برادرها متفرق شید. از میان ما تنها برادر گلگون مجروح شده بود. گفته بودیم که با او بیشتر آشنا خواهید شد. شهید مجیدی با کمک شهید عراقی جراحت او را پانسمان می‌کردند و کمی آن طرفتر نیز شهید اکبری نشسته بود. ببینید برادر گلگون در جواب ما چه میگوید.
علی آقا خسته نباشید. الان که زخم شدی چه حالیه؟ میتونی تو بگی؟ زخم شدیدی هم برداشتی و عمیقه ولی
سعی میکنم دفعه دیگه زودتر بیام جبهه.
اینو باید اومدی علی آقا.
Warfare began on September 22, 1980, when Iraq broke the Baghdad Pact armed forces invading western Iran along the country's joint border. On September 23, 1980, Iran bombs Iraq's military and economic targets. On June 1981, Israel attacks the Iraqi Nuclear Research Center near Baghdad. Iraqi retreat, June 1982. Saddam was aware that his troops were demoralized after a string of defeats beginning in March of 1982. Saddam ordered a full retreat back with the pre-war Iran-Iraq border. Saddam did not believe his troops could defend the territory they still held inside Iran in their deflated state, withdrawing them instead of risking further losses. Iran refused his peace offering, June 1982. After Iraq withdrew from Iran, Khomeini proclaimed that Iran would invade Iraq. Saddam, with the backing of fellow Arab states, offered terms to Iran in order to end the fighting. The offer included $70 billion in war reparations. Iran refused, insisting that the only acceptable resolution was the removal of Saddam from power. Failed Iran invasion of Basra, July 1982. Iran's first offensive into Iraq targeted the strategic city of Basra, since Iraq would lose access to the Persian Gulf if lost. Iran employed human wave attacks, where unarmed soldiers, mostly boys, rushed the enemy position with the support of armed infantry and air support. However, Iraq soldiers were much more deeply entrenched within their own fortifications when human wave attacks were used with greater success inside Iran. As a result, this operation was extremely deadly for Iran. In 1984, the USA feared the victory of Iran, so it renewed diplomatic relations with Iraq. So the USA armed and trained the Iraq army. On August 20th, 1988, Iran accepts the UN-brokered ceasefire.
During the 8 years between Iraq's formal declaration of war on September 22, 1980, and Iran's acceptance of the ceasefire on July 20, 1988, at the very least, 500,000, possibly twice as many troops were killed on both sides. At least 500,000 became permanent invalids, some $228 billion were directly expended, and more than $400 billion of damage, mostly to the oil facilities, were inflicted. This was mostly due to the artillery barges. The protracted war between these neighboring Middle Eastern countries resulted in at least 500,000 casualties and several $billion worth of damages, but no real gains were acquired by either.
Okay, so now let's talk about some major events of the war. First, we have from 1961 to 1975, when Iran gave assistance to the Kurdish rebels in northern Iraq in order to drain the Iraqi resources. Second, on June 13th and December 25th, 1975, when Iran and Iraq signed the Algiers Agreement to settle a border dispute and end the Kurdish revolution. In this, Iran withdrew support for the Kurds, and in return, Iraq would recognize the Shat Waterway as Iran's property. Third, September 17th, 1980, Saddam Hussein ended the Algiers Agreement. Number 4, September 22nd, 1980, the Iraqis first launched a major offensive. Fifth, at the end of October in 1980, Khorramshahr, the largest port in Iran, was captured. Number 6, June 1982, Iran launches their counteroffensive, rejects a ceasefire, and leads to the Iraqi retreat. 7, July 1982, failed Iranian invasion of Basra. Number 8, 1983, the Iranian invasions, all of which were largely unsuccessful and didn't result in much, if any, land gain. 9, May 1984, Iraq attacks Iranian tankers and oil terminals at Karg Island in the Gulf, thus beginning the tanker war that lasted from 1984 through 1988. This event even dragged in the United States to direct combat with Iran. 10. From 1985 through 1988, it was mostly just a stalemate with lots of fighting but no significant gains for either side. 11. 1985. This marks the bombing of civilian centers in the War of Cities, which was a 5 series of air raids, missile attacks, and artillery shellings on major cities. Iraq targeted Tehran, Tabriz, Isfahan, and Shiraz, and Iran retaliated, targeting mostly Baghdad, Kirkuk, and Basra. 12. In July 1987, the UN Resolution 598 calls for an immediate ceasefire, withdrawal of troops back into their country's own internationally recognized borders, and the release and repatriation of prisoners. 13. July 1988, a U.S. carrier shoots down an Iranian civilian airliner, claiming they thought it was a fighter, killing 290 people, 66 of which were children. Iran sees this differently and claims that it was an intentional and planned attack. Lastly, number 14, August 1988, the ceasefire was officially agreed between the two countries.
On July 20th, 1987, the United Nations Security Council called for an immediate ceasefire between Iran and Iraq and the repatriation of prisoners of war, and for both sides to withdraw to the international border. The resolution requested the Secretary General to dispatch a team of observers to monitor the ceasefire while a permanent settlement was reached to end the conflict. This became effective on August 8, 1988, ending all combat operations between the two countries, and the Iran-Iraq War came to an official end on August 20th, 1988.
Finally, let's talk about what happened after all of this. So neither side had to pay war reparations, and both sides went back to their pre-war boundaries. Both countries' oil industries were crippled due to the bombings targeted specifically at large oil-producing cities. In Iran, the new Islamic State that was established fostered loyalty and devotion built on radical ideology. Iraq, extremely in debt, was forced to take out massive loans from Kuwait. This overwhelming debt to Kuwait gained support from the citizens for the 1990 invasion that prompted the Gulf War and led to suffocating sanctions and the removal of Hussein from power in 2003. As for the casualties suffered on both sides, Iraq suffered between 250,000 and 500,000 casualties of civilians and soldiers, and Iran suffered 500,000 to 800,000 casualties of soldiers and civilians. Both of these numbers are disputed, and I found multiple sources that supported either the lower end or the higher end, so the exact number can't be sure. So how does all of this correlate back to the Cold War? Well, many countries obviously took sides and donated to one more so than the other, and in the case of the Soviet Union, they officially remained neutral. However, was Iraq's largest supplier of military equipment, including chemical weapons, and provided smaller-scale support to Iran. The United States, however, publicly supported Iraq and gave large amounts of financial aid and advanced equipment. They even engaged Iran directly in the Persian Gulf. Secretly, they gave weapons to Iran in exchange for hostages held by Iran in their proxy Hezbollah in Lebanon during the Iran-Contra affair. Now that covers the two main countries we think of when we're discussing the Cold War, but a few other countries that had significant contributions was Spain, that supplied chemical weapons to Iraq, North Korea, who sold military equipment in exchange for U.S. currency, and Israel, who sold equipment to Iran due to a fear of a strengthened Saddam-led Iraq and the threat that it might impose on them.